So everyone really succeed with the quiz? Everyone got 20 answers? 12? Because we're going to do that on the same, on a higher level, so you've got to be ready. We've got apparently a short of time to cover the things. It's a top 10, but I have to admit right away that it's a lie. Okay, I've got 73 slides. Apparently, top 73 error in PHP was not very sellable, so we actually shrunk it to 10, but that's going to be still a lot of problems. So since it's a little boring to just go around and say, oh, this is bad and this is good, we actually cover two different levels. There are things that are more beginner, that will be easier to understand, and there are also really tricky and crazy stuff. So depending on your level and your interest, well, switch off your mind for a few seconds and then move along the way. I will also, well, I've already been introduced. I'm an elephant retirer. I have a retirement home. For those of you who don't know this one, this is the first elephant ever. So there was a moment in the world where there was only one elephant. It's called the Trisail. It's 13-year-old, very, very old elephant. But it's still available. It's still actually holding the load, so you can stack it very easily. And up to 5. Okay, last record was up to 5. Now let's move to the interesting part. I've actually labeled the slides with different logos so you can understand easier and not mistake the bad code from the good code. Okay, there will be some of them directed at bugs, little bugs or big bugs, but bugs in general. Performance potential, things that will speed up your code. It may speed it up very slightly or a lot, okay? So depending on what you're using in your code, your mileage may vary, but it's always a little faster. Convenient tool is something that will make your life as a programmer better, and that will also probably help you hire people because they will look like you're using awesome syntax, and that's something blowing their mind, so they will want to work more with you. Also, unlike the rest of the sessions, I will taking the question along the way, okay? So please log now if you want on Cloud.io, so you can actually answer, put the question. I will also decide when I answer them, because sometimes you are actually undercutting my next slide, so I will choose when I want to answer that, but otherwise the leftover will be we will dealt with at the end. Okay, now, without further ado, let's start with one of the very classic problems so you can understand the different logos. Everyone knows about this problem there? The problem with strpos. That's a classic one. strpos will look for the string A in the variable A, knowing if it's a string or not. And if it's a string, then it will report the offset where it found the A in the string. Easy enough, right? Everyone does that. And you have to remember that string offset starts at 0. And then if the string is not found in the bigger one, then it will return false, which, as you've seen in the quiz, false and 0 are the same, meaning that finding A on the first element of the string or not is completely confused here. And you will not make the difference. So all of those conditions here are the same, and they all confuse finding the letter on the first element or not finding it. So the answer here is to always make a triple comparison, in particular when you're looking for things that are at the beginning or not finding them. So you need the triple equal. Oh, I will use that. You need the triple equal whenever you're comparing it with 0, so you make the difference between the first offset or nothing. If you're comparing with something else, it usually is okay. Okay, because then it will be a string or it will be a false, and then it will not be different. Now, I have to have, this is an easy one, everyone has experienced it? No? Yes? I think there's a lot of people there. Come guys, take time, but go on the other side or something. You're going to make me tired by standing like that. I'm supposed to be the one standing. So, let me have a little, and there's some spot here, so come. Now, everyone has been bitten by this strpos function, but the bad news is there are more than one function that behaves like that. Now, I would like you to all raise your hands, and we're going to count the number of functions that are native from PHP and behaving this way, okay? So all start your hands. Who thinks there are more than one function that behaves like that? Okay, I see people not raising their hand. Now keep them up. Okay, you should start at more than one because I've shown one, and you know there's the close cousin of strpos, so there's a second one, right? More than 5. More than 10. More than 15. Now there are 4,000 of them. That's going to be a long hour, right? More than 20. 25. 26. So 26 is the list. And I'm not kidding. All of them are behaving the same. So you may have not using strpos. There are others that behave the same that will make mistake, finding something, not finding something, or finding an error, and reporting a bad result. So be very careful with that. All of them are doing the same kind of problem. Now, strpos is a good one, and I have some kind of another anti-pattern for this problem, which is this one. So there's another legend about strpos, and that would be this one. Now, OpenSSL is not often used, but you can basically read the code from here, right? I will try to verify with OpenSSL some data using a signature and a public key. Easy enough, right? No problem with that. If it works, then I get a login of my user. Safe, right? So, of course, you've got to consider that OpenSSL will return 1 in case of success, 0 in case of failure, and unlike strpos, you cannot mistake that. It will not return -1, false for a failure. It will use -1 for an error. So you won't mistake that, right? No 0 mistaken with false. Does that frighten you? The thing is, when you use it straight, 1 is going to be true, 0 is going to be false, and -1 is going to be true. Ooh. Meaning that if you manage to borrow the signature of the public key, that will be an error, that will be returning -1, and again, that will now work. Submitting a bad signature will now make you work with this condition. Again, you should make a triple comparison, or at least a straight comparison with 0, -1, or +1, and be sure that you're comparing something with something you know, and not just hope that PHP is going to juggle and do something right for you. Right? Again, shall we start the counting of functions that behave like that? I'm pretty sure we can remove the 26 function we had previously from the lot, so 4,000 minus 26, still going to be a long day, that's going to be 13. Lots of them are on OpenSSL, but people from OpenSSL have started understanding the problem, so they're now raising exception in case of error, using another track to make sure that the error is processed another way and do not leave the code running while it's still a security feature. That's exactly the case, for example, for random hint. Random hint will, if it cannot produce a random number, it will stop and just throw an exception. That's going to be rare, but that's also going to not leave your code at the point where it is saying, oh, that's a 0, that's a random number. No, that goes on. OpenSSL, for example, random pseudo, that's a long name, but that's going to happen in 4. Let's move on. Let's try to do a little bit of performances. That's going to be a light one. I keep the other one next to her. What's wrong with this one? Why is it slow? That's a function call. That's a function call. That's a complete function call. PHP has to wait for compilation, preparing the cache, executing, and when he hit that point, then he will decide that A is true. And you know that from the beginning. You know exactly everything from the beginning. So the actual thing you have to do is to use the const. Const have always been introduced as the constant for classes, and that's exactly the same keyword, but you can use it from the outside. So it works for global constants, and it works for class constants. Now, is that really a big gain? And unless you're actually creating a million constants, probably not going to make a major difference. And beside that, people usually mention 2 other use cases that are now covered with const. So const will be processed as a keyword and a lot faster than a function call. And it's built in the op cache, and that's more efficient. But there are 2 situations that we can't really address. The first one is defined with variable constants, variable name and variable value. Anyone knows how you access a variable constant? Well, we have variable, right? But how do you access a function for which you have the name of the constant? How do you access a constant for which you have the name of the constant in a string, and you need to access it dynamically. Never tried that? They are dynamic constants, so that's fun. It's the constant function. So the constant function is for accessing the value, and the define for the value instead. Anyway, constant here, we have, define works with in case insensitive constant names. Who's using case insensitive constant name here? Well, there's more than 100 of us, so 2 people should raise their hand. There's like 2% of people using that feature, so it's going to go away. It's already the case in 7.3. You've got this obsolete warning, and probably in 8 is going to be gone completely. Okay, so it's on the way out. The other one is a little trickier because we cannot really do anything dynamic in constants, but we can also use constant static expressions. Do not try to call any function there, but as long as you're using operators, you can combine them as much as you want. So the first one was just constant and a value. The second one is built on top of other literal. The third one is an array, which works as a constant static expression. And it's also built with other constants which were predefined, and a class constants which then will be loaded at usage. You can even have not if-then questions and conditions, but you can use the ternary operator. And arrays, even combine some arrays. You cannot make the difference and intersection because it's too difficult, it's a function call. But since plus is usable with arrays, then the last one is also working. That will probably trim down the number of situations where you need define instead of a const to very, very little. Fair enough? Easy, okay, let's go on. Let's start more interesting things. Where's the potential for performance here? 3? 3 calls. Yeah, again, 3 calls. As usual, we're going to hit hard on constant function calls. Function calls are always costly. So if we can remove them, then it's going to be better. Here, well, print is not exactly a function call. It's a language construct, but it still behaves like a function call for us, and calling 3 times prints instead of just once is going to be slower, okay? Fair enough. Why is that worse? We now have reduced number of calls from 3 to 1, but we've created this concatenation. What does this concatenation do? Very simple. Well, print only accepts 1 argument, so it says A is concatenated with B, so it at first PHP has to actually allocate memory to actually concatenate the 2 of them, then do another allocation to actually add the C, and then it will say, okay, where do I put that? Nowhere, I just flush it to the output and everything is mallocked, freed. So you're losing memory here. You're actually doing some extra work just for making sure it's just 1 argument. Who is able to output data and still make it 1 call with several arguments? Echo, our good friend Echo. So use Echo, and not that from the previous one, I changed the echo to the print to Echo, and I changed the comma, the dot by comma. That's the only difference. It's the same, except here PHP will just say, okay, this literal, I already know it's already allocated. I threw it outside on the output, and I do not copy it again. So here, if B is just 1 letter, you're probably not going to see any performance. But if you're starting to build some kind of a template where you're just working a lot on different variable, then you probably are going to see the improvements. And finally, you have to know that if we want to fall back to the first syntax, then we can also write it this way. So it's still kind of readable. We just have to change the semicolon to commas and go back to the new line, and then got some results, right? We'll just finish for that, and I see questions coming in. Just remember that, on the other hand, echo is not a function. Echo do not behave like a function, so first you can remove the parentheses, because they do not play any work here, okay? I know Juliet told you to use a lot of them, not here. That doesn't play anything. The other thing is, you're going to also to miss, since echo is not a function, you're going to miss the capacity of adding the last comma. The last comma is introduced in PHP 7.3, and we can have the last argument with a final comma, just like we do for the arrays, remember? And this way, when you do a diff between the current version and the next version, where you actually add an extra argument, in particular with echo, then you can just have a diff of one line and not 2 lines. That would be better. So don't use it. Don't use all those elements for PHP for echo, but the rest applies. So I see. Should we use static or constant property in classes? Oh, so in that case, in particular for the const thing, as much as possible, if you're not doing any change to the property, use constant so that you know exactly what it is. Okay. Most of the time, people will not mix property. Well, they don't want to put the properties directly inside a string, so that will be not a problem for anyone. Okay. I will keep this one for later then. Then let's move on. More interesting, here is a reverse problem from the previous one. You will see, you will understand why it is. What do we do here? We open a file, and we've got an array. There is no source for the array, but you can imagine an array of arrays. Okay, very simple, that's not polluting the case. And we just scan the array and dump it into a CVS file. Now this is slow. This is actually very, very slow. Why? What is the problem here? We get every element from the array as a row. The row will be given to the CSV. CSV will do the work of turning the array, the internal array, into something that's protected. So we want PHP to have that feature. We want PHP to handle that work. If you check the number of bugs that related to fput CVS, you know that you don't want to start doing your own CVS writer. That's a lot. But then if we can't escape that, where's the problem? IOs. Every time we do fput, that's a good answer. Every time we do fput, PHP will actually turn that into a string, write that to the disk, wait for the disk to finish, and then go back and try again. So we have to skip that. How do we skip the IOs, but still use fput CVS? I'm sorry, I don't know. Just buffer. Yes? Which buffer? I'm going to stay there. Which buffer? Memory, that's a good one. I don't want to answer anymore. There's a special file in PHP which we can use, which is PHP memory. We open it as a file, and it will be just a chunk of memory for PHP that allows writing and reading just like we do with any other file, but now it's in memory. And we don't have any I/O anymore. So we can open the file, write everything over there with fput CVS, and know that fput CVS is going to be a good job as writing that exactly the right way. Then, well, we do not close it because we'll destroy it, but we rewind it. Please, if you're using that trick, do not forget the rewind, or you will come back to me and say, yeah, Damien, I wrote my file and it's just empty. No. Rewind it and then read it again, and then fput string. And just in one dump, you have all the elements going on the file. That's a lot faster. Everyone using CVS file those days? No? So what are you using? Yeah, a few two guys, but I'm also using them, so you're safe with me. You can do that with other things. We can do that with a writer, XML writer, for example. Instead of writing to the disk, give it a piece of memory. Or if you're building your YAML, instead of writing line by line, then maybe it's good to put it directly in this memory. Okay, so that could have other applications. So yeah, a long-running operation using a lot of RAM, then we're going to have big variables. I think that kind of relates to this one. Of course, here you're trading performances for memory. Okay, so if you're already using a lot of memory, then you're going to use even more at that point. It's probably not going to be the best choice, but at least you have got the tool on your belt. And I keep the rest. Let's move on. Something else. That could have been in the quiz, but it was way too difficult, so I think Juliet dropped it. What is going to be in A1? Let me help you. Who thinks A1 is going to be true? Yeah, 3, 4. False? No one false. 0? Array? 1? 3? 2? So the good answer is 3. On the other hand, what's going to be in A2, which looks like the same? True? Who thinks true? Oh, more people now. Yeah, confidence building. Good. False, maybe? Again, we can try, I don't know, an object or something. So the answer is A1 is going to be 3. And A2 is going to be 1. So how it works is something that you're going to hate, which still bites us, is operator precedence, which is that if we wanted to have A2 and A1 to be identical, we should have used the parentheses. The thing is, I'm going to go back on this one. The first one, what you don't see here is that equal, so assignation operator, has a higher priority than AND. Meaning that when you read that, you think, oh, I'm going to assign A and B and C to A1, but you're actually doing A1 and B, and PHP say, oh, that's complete because AND has a lower priority. So I stop, execute that first. So I get the 3, put the 3 from B, put it in A1. Then I do the logical comparison, 3 and what's that, 1? So I get 1, normal stuff. But then there's no one to receive that result. Just, okay, shove it away and go on. On the other one, the second one actually works as expected. A2 is B, but B is followed by something that has a higher precedence. Then you say, okay, hold on, before assigning, we have to do something more, and then we get the B and C together. It's a 1, and then the 1 goes into the good one. So that works. That's really biting, okay? That's wrong, and that's the good way. If you have parentheses, the first advice is usually do not use the lettered comparison operator, because, well, the logical operator, because it has weird priorities. The other matters actually can bite us further. Have you ever thought this looks like a weird syntax? Initially, I was so afraid of it that I would put parentheses on my own. I mean, look at how we read that. A is an object. It's obvious it's just before. And then I go a not object, not something that probably is positive. It's such false. False is a Boolean, and the Boolean is never going to be an instance of std class. I could not read that otherwise. But in fact, instance of is one of the highest ranking operators, so it will be not something that is the result of the instance of. The instance of has priority, it executes first. So that works as expected, it's just unreadable, at least to me. I don't know for you guys, you're younger than me, but it works. So let's see worse. This one. This one. So this one is even a little tricky because until PHP 7.3, concatenation and addition, subtraction would work also, but I don't want to mess with your mind. Addition and concatenation have the same level of priority. So the first one is the first served. So in 7.3, what happens is you got echo. Echo say, okay, I'm going to wait for the results. Fine. Echo, I do the concatenation. So it's going to be A plus B equal dot the 1. That's a whole string that do not convert into an integer. So PHP will first yell something. Say, okay, I try to convert something and I'm not happy. And then it will do that plus B, and you get the end result of the final B, because that's going to be 2 and 0. Now, I added this slide because on PHP 7.4, that's going to disappear. In 7.4, there's a change on precedence, and addition will be higher priority than concatenation. So that's now going to behave as you expect it as a human. The addition will be done first, and you don't need the parentheses. Until this is settled, put parentheses there, or just don't put addition into concatenation. That's going to be safer. Now, a little one that's really weird. Just to finish, how much is that? I don't want to know what I should be, but then probably by extension you can understand what it's going to be. It's going to be -9. What you see, what you don't see. If you think like a PHP operator, binary, there are actually two operators. There's the minus, and then there's the power. And as for that, it's kind of normal, but minus as an addition has lower priority than power. Meaning that PHP parsing that, say minus, okay, what's the next thing? It's an integer first. Okay, so I get -3. Oh, hold on, there's something that has higher priority. There's a power. So let's stop. Let's do first the power. 3 power 2, 9, easy. Oh, there's the minus unary. I'll go back and I get a -9. That does not apply if you put that into a variable again, right? It's just at parsing. So if you're parsing literals and having that, so probably you're not using too much power as a constant, but still kind of weird. Probably explain why PHP is not so loved in mathematical world. Anyway, back to this one. I heard some kind of divergence between my answers and the one coming from the crowd. What were the answers for those? Remember? This is still the same wrong code we had like 10 minutes ago, so. No, you're talking too much again. Someone else. What was the answers? 3 and 1. Good. More people listening. Is that weird? Did you expect 3 and 1? What was your first answer? So, okay, the 3 was not expected, the 1 was good, but even the 1 was not expected. Why? It should have been? That should have been a Boolean, which actually works most of the time. Because if it's a 1, that's going to be true. I mean, the results from A2, if it's a number, an integer, or a Boolean, would be working, okay? If we, I don't know, switch the 3 to a 0, we end up with 0, and that would be false. If we keep the 3, that will be, again, 1, and then be true, so it works. Except that PHP is actually sending us an integer. When PHP finds that there are integers on both sides, it will return the result as the same type. If it finds something that's not the same on both sides, then it will just return a Boolean most of the time. If you put an object on one side and an array on the other side, you will get an integer. On the other hand, there's one extension to that. So integer gives you integer. Most of the other case will give you Boolean, and there's one last problem. If we use string and string, we get back a string. Meaning that if I'm trying to have P as A and C as P, I will get the string 0. Did you have problems with strings recently into a comparison? No? Everyone answered well at that question in the quiz, right? But this is going back as a string. Actually, I tried to check what, I had to work a little bit to find the actual value and just, be funny with that. So the first one is stuck. If you see, I had to cover all the different letters. What is really funny is that even the numbers from the results are not in the right order. Okay, it's based on the ASCII, so I'm not going to blame PHP for that. But I find it fun. So when we see that, we actually, if you end up, by some chance, having two different integer strings coming in on that kind of comparison, then you will end up a string. So I'll give you this one. But that's not for beginners, so those of you who are not at ease, what is that? What is that? So you've got to follow what we said. The most important one is here. Okay. Initially, when I actually got this piece of code, I took a long time because there's the double quote here and there. No, what is that? There. So that's the end. That's the beginning. But in between, it's actually two strings together without no space. They are really bad at indenting this code, right? So please ident your code much better than that. So you've got so you end up with a piece of string here and another piece of string there. Can you decode that? No, you can't, of course. I did it. It's get. Ooh. And then you've got variables, which means that the second part is going to be that. And then you've got, of course, the echo here, so you've got yourself a nice injection without using any letter. Don't try that at home, it's pretty bad. But if you wonder how people manage to actually do some web shells and inject stuff in your code without you with you filtering all the get, post, and request, that's because they are not there, they're in this way. And you can make them a lot of variation, right? I used those strange ones, but you can make a lot of other characters and still end up with a get and post. I've even used people, instead of using that string, they use the array itself. An empty array, which will turn into array with a big A, and then PHP will use that as a variable name. So there's lots of fun. Anyway, that was too difficult. Just know that about it. That could be interesting in security. Reality, do not use reals. Reals are going away in PHP. I am breaking the news to you. There will not be any more reals in PHP anymore in 7.4, I think. Who's using reals? No one. Okay, who cares, right? We can move on. We can move on because actually PHP has two different definitions for numbers with floating variables, floating comma. So they realize that they have two names and they have also two ways to handle them, meaning that on top of the mess that is the real numbers, then you also may have different values depending on the way you code. So the two of them are going away, and they kept the name float. So if you want to prepare for 7.4, every time you have isReal or the type cast, then switch it to float, and that will be fine. Well, maybe some little, preparation, but that should be fine. Okay. And I wanted to also add this one that was interesting, just a piece of trick. But the most important part here is that I actually added this slide this morning at 8:15. Okay, I just read that online, tweeted it again. But for those of you who are using numbers, round also accept negative numbers. I find it interesting. Both because you may think that I'm the expert here, but I just learned that again this morning. And I've translated the documentation at least 3 times. Okay, so I forgot about it. Always interesting to go back to the actual documentation and learn things. That will avoid you, dividing the number by 100, doing a 4-0 round, and then multiplying it again. That will save you a lot of coding. Okay? Just a little trick, and keep learning all the time. So, that said, no question. Good. Is it too fast, or you have time to ask questions? Okay, anyway, so substr 1, we're going to say function call is bad again. Can we make that faster? You're not the one talking, right? I see you there. You're not far enough. Yeah, array access. So array access meaning that you use, again, an operator with the position. As long as you're just picking 1 byte, it's good. Not more, not less, just 1 byte is good. And what's more interesting is that substr had this advantage over the array access, which was that it would handle minus. And minus still works now. So it works also as an index, even works inside a string, unless you're probably before 7.2, okay? Like it's been fixed recently, maybe 7.1. So if you're using in not that recent version, check it before you use it. But you can, if you're just accessing one byte, it's fine. And I'm going to emphasize on 1 byte. If you want to have several bytes because you're speaking Chinese, that happens, okay? Then probably you necessarily have to stay with MB string. You have to ditch the substring, but make it just access with MB string. MB string will handle characters and not bytes, okay? So generally speaking, you can probably get rid of substring because either the array access are better or MB string will do a better job, okay? Now let's go one step further. Why is that a problem? I see that quite often, and you're going to see again that we can have a lot of variation on this kind of syntax. Why is it wrong? Get a string, make it lowercase, and then extract a part of it. Simple enough. Let me just put a better context. You downloaded a movie, you wanted to make it lowercase, right? Happens all the time. 2 gigabytes, you read the 2 gigabyte, make it lowercase, and then you select just the 5 first characters. That's exactly what you're doing here, okay? You're doing too much work. And we can actually, well, first we should switch the 2 of them, put the substr first, so reduce the amount of string you're working on, and then do the actual work on it. Okay? And you have to consider that substring is not the only function that reduce a piece of string. There's a lot of them. dirname is one of them. Now, hopefully, you do not have paths that are 2 gigabytes long. If you do, you have another problem. But you may have paths that are pretty large. It may be a URL. dirname works on a URL, a URI or so. So you can actually chop a part of the URI, and URIs may be up to 4K. So you're working too much. Think about it. Anytime you have that kind of optimization, shorten the data first and then work on it. That's going to be an improvement for your code. Okay? The other example I have, although I will add some more caution, is that it works much better on arrays, but less often. Here we've got a slice. Slice will actually do the work as substring, and map will do the work as processing every element in the array with one function. So on the first one, we're getting the element from 2 to 5 after having processed all the array with foo, but we're obviously working too much. So we should actually do the reverse first, remove the elements, and then just apply it. Now, when I say caution, of course, if you're doing something like sorting first and then doing the top 5, please do not switch them. That's not going to work, okay? You don't want to do the top 5 or something you have already selected, okay? Just be a little more careful. On string, it's pretty straightforward. Most of the time, just shortening the string first and then processing will be better. And here, with arrays, you have to be a little more cautious. So, of course, we're going to talk with our good friend, the loop. No, that's not the question. That's my slide. 2 problems here. Any suggestion? No, I'm not listening with my right here. They think they are safe over there, so. So the first one, yeah, count. We're repeating count all the time, so that's first thing. Count once should be sufficient, just should be moved outside. Then the I itself doesn't really make any sense. And accessing the array through the index here to rewrite it to rewrite it with the upper version will be bad. So 4 is going to be better, and in particular 4 with the reference. If you can, avoid as much as possible accessing the initial array with the index notation. That's much slower. Make it a reference and then directly reassign the value. That makes the code faster. And we're going to see that a little further, but before I want to work on this one, which is more interesting.
How about array map?
Sorry?
How about array map?
In terms of?
In terms of mapping the same result of, because we're changing every element in an array, so we can use array map in the previous.
To change it? Yeah. Usually, strangely enough, array map is slower than using for each. Probably because array map makes, again, a function call, which means context call, and then you're going to pay that in the end, okay? So at that point, it's more of a development paradigm, meaning that if you prefer to have those transformation on the array as a library where people can just collect them and they've been optimized, then you're going to suffer a little more penalty, but you have a different approach of programming. But sadly enough, using for each is faster. So I'm kind of, mixed on this one. So on this one, what happens? Well, we've got a bad situation first. It's a little built for that because I need it for the presentation, but basically we're reading a list of elements from a table, whatever the source. We want to have all the elements from these lists separated, so that's why we have the explode, and then every element together in the final list and just make wide gigantic list. Okay? I think that's simple enough. Now the question is, why is this so slow? Why is it such a problem? How does that work? Well, we start with final. Final is empty, 0, very little memory allocation. We go get the first line, and we get, say, 2 elements. So PHP says, okay, good, I'm going to do a merge. Merge 2 elements with 0. I have to reallocate 2 elements. I copy them, and I'm good. Oh, hold on, there's a second one. So second time, final is now 2 elements. I need to, for example, add 3 elements. So PHP says, oh, I'm going to do a merge. So easy. I'm going to have 2 and 3, 5. I'm going to allocate 5, an array of 5, and I'm going to copy them. Oh, there's another one. It's again 2. So good, stop. I have 5. I have to copy 5 and then the new 2s. That's 7. Then I copy all of them, and I have a new temporary array. And I go on again. Oh, now it's 13, so I've got my 9 first, 9, 13, and I copy all of them. Every time you do a loop, you've got a new temporary array. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but you're building every time a new array. PHP is not able to optimize that at all. The only way we would have optimized that, it would do just one call to array merge. Can we do that? Yeah, that's the next slide, yeah. Yeah, good. Best answer ever. What we can do is actually do an array. We don't have to do the array merge at the point inside the loop. So we can actually store that into another array. And at that point, the second array is just holding like references, small integers, so it can actually handle a lot of them, and there's no copy. In the end, we just end up with an array of arrays which looks big, but is not asking for much memory. So it's good enough. And then we have to call array merge in one time. And array merge accepts an arbitrary number of arguments for which we can just spread all the argument by these 3 dots. For those of you who don't like 3 dots because it looks weird and like kind of Word, Microsoft Word stuff, you can use the old function, which is called user array function array. You see, I forgot that. I don't use it anymore. Anyway, there's a function that has that long, which accepts the name array merge as a string, and then all the argument behind, which also will be efficient. So if you're using PHP 4, okay, yeah. Anyway, 5 also. But that's a lot. That looks more cumbersome. It's actually a lot more efficient, and that can be several times faster than the previous one if you have even short arrays, like 2 or 3 elements in an array. That's just efficient. Good enough? No question? No. So let's move again. Let's try. Oh, sorry. Did you notice the little operator I'm using there? Yeah? Who's using this one? You know this short operator? Short assignment operator? This is not. Most of the time, people will use this one, right? That's the one that makes sense. For PHP, the operator is actually just this one. So you can put the double bracket anywhere you want. Close to the variable, close to the equal. You can even put a comment between them. Don't do that. But anyway, could we do the same that we've seen on the arrays with the concats? Would that work? Who think that's going to work on concats? Yeah, still, exactly the same principle. We're going to have exactly the same problem. We've got A is a string, and if it's concatenated with something else, PHP will actually copy everything. It will say, oh, we've got another string, I will copy double the size, put everything into place, and try that again, and you've got a lot of strings. Except it's going to be less efficient, or at least less performance-eating than on the previous one. So if you're collecting data like that, just like we've done before, you should actually collect them into an array and call implode, which again accepts a huge amount of argument in one call and get all the results in one call. You can even at that point add yourself the same glue that will make every element together, but by default, empty string works very well. Right? Sorry?
Short strings will be faster with concatenation.
Short strings? Yeah, that's probably, it's really obvious on arrays. It will be, the bar will be a little higher. So if you've got a few strings, yeah, probably that's right. But it will going to be faster with that. Yeah, bigger sets or number or size of string. So that makes a lot of parameter to take into account, okay? The first one I would say very systematic. The second one might be, less cumbersome. So let's move on. Addition. I like the silence. This is refreshing. We read now something in the database. We have elements. What are we going to use? We used array merge. We used implode. What are we going to use? Yeah, bad idea. That doesn't work. Okay, that was a trap, so it's normal. There's a resum, yes, use it. If you have all your elements as an array, use a resum, do not loop, that's good. But the problem we've seen with strings, that's exactly what you were mentioning, is about memory allocation. We don't have that problem here because it's an integer. You're just piling stuff on top of the same integer, there's no reallocation, okay? So concat, yes, arrays, yes, maybe function calls or something like that, maybe that's worth it. If just an addition, maybe a multiplication would be wrong because after 12 multiplication is going to be over PHP capacity, but you probably detect that yourself, right? So no resum for that, just do it the old way. Let's move on. How long do we have? We have another 50. Oh, question. Allocation of new array element is faster than allocation of new variables. No, so that's going to be a tricky one. Maybe I could do to get that at the end. Yeah, I'll keep that for later. Sorry for that. Let's move on because we have others. Subpatterns. the missing subpattern, okay? So very simple regex here. We want the A is captured by the parentheses, and then the B, if it's there, is going to be captured. Simple enough. You don't need to be a regex wizard to understand that. Good. The trick here is that if the B is not there, then you're going to lose one element. See the difference with the previous one. Here, I capture everything, and I've got 1, 2, 3. 0 is always there because it's the capturing wall string, and then you've got all the subpattern, the captured subpattern. The second one, since the B is not there, the regex is still valid, but I'm losing the last one. It only applies on the last one, okay? So if you have the conditional subpattern in the middle, and something happens to be captured after, it will still be there. But if it's the last one, then sometimes you will have it, sometimes you won't have it. And you really see that in PHP code, saying, oh, sometimes the last element is not here, so we have to test for it after the regex. So the regex match, but you're missing some of the elements you're looking for. Okay, that's because of this conditional problem. Now, this is an interesting one. There's a lot of workaround to fix that problem. The easiest one is just to make the last parenthesis always capturing, okay? The main difference is that the question mark, which was outside, is now inside. So the parenthesis here is now always there, even if it captures nothing, okay? And having the last one always there makes the previous one always available, and now you've got a static feedback on the regex you're running, okay? The good news is on 7.4, the user group managed to understand that problem, and we've got a special option for regex where we can say, I always want the same amount of result, even if it's null. So on 7.4, you can solve that problem without changing your regex. Previously, or if you're still working on 7.3 or older, then you have got to put this final element. Okay? Now, one thing I like to look at that is who's been using PHP 4? I mean, not now, but like years ago. Yeah, few. No, not too many. Okay, guys, thank you for coming and listening to me. I feel not that alone. Does that look like we're doing regex like we were doing PHP 4 code? Remember when we were connecting not to MySQLi, shorter, not to MySQL, shorter, not, but connecting to MSQL. There's nothing like SQL in PHP, so. MSQL, we would actually connect, do the query, and then say, I want the column number 0, the column number 1, the column number 2. And then, of course, the sysadmin would show up and say, oh, I'm going to switch those 2 columns just for fun. Ah, damn, now we've got to change everything again. Until someone says, hey, why not give the name of the column to the index? That would be easier to read, and if someone switches it, then we don't care. But here we don't do that, right? We've got the numbers, that's all. But we can name subpatterns here. There are actually 2 different syntax where you can give a name to the subpattern and the name will appear later. And now if someone decides to add some extra subpattern before, after, or move your own somewhere else, the name will still be here. You're not programming like PHP 4 again. No? No, okay. Anyway, if that makes the regex a little too cumbersome for you, you can also add comments and even explain the comments. So let's do that. Anyway, let's move on to the one of the classic problem. Next month, I have to stop at what? 30, right? Yeah, we're good. What's the problem there? We've got a date, we want the next month, and we add 1 month, and we end up with something else. So it works if you're on January 1st, but it's bad if you're doing that on October 1st, because in between, PHP thinks that a month is always 31 days, so it will add 31 days, and we end up a month too long, too long. So do not add months whenever you're doing any date calculation. Good enough? Who's still using str2time? It should be in the question. No, not there. So, yeah, no one using str2time, right? That's because I'm an old-timer still using PHP 4. You're using what, datetime? Yeah, so that's the good solution. Use datetime, because datetime, you can actually get a date, add 1 month. Oh, no, it's the same problem. But no one's using datetime anymore also, right? Are you using datetime? What are you using? carbon. Okay, carbon, good choice. Carbon is going to solve the problem. So carbon, you get carbon, you use composer. It's a lot more work because someone has thought that very thoughtfully. You get ready to date, you add, oh, damn. That remember is wrong on the slides, right? Usually I get another one, there's another library, like Chronolog or something like that. But every time I've given that, I've added a new library, and all of them are behaving the same. So just be careful. The good thing to know is since they're all relying on the same element underlying, okay, they go back all to str2 times. So there are other names you can use instead of adding a month, and this one is a good one. That will tell you the first day of the next month for which you can actually start building other intervals, okay? So do not rely on the month. The other things other calculations are pretty fine, but months, always a mess, always a mess. Okay, that's a low murmur. I should hear people yelling stuff. I don't hear anything. There's four problems with that, at least. Why is that wrong? Yeah, but... Good, that's two of them. Then there's the other one. Leap seconds, and of course, that's the most obvious, so leap year also works. And there's also, the sysadmin suddenly realizing that the NNTP server is off, so it fixes it, and then suddenly your script have an hour difference. So don't use that. Use tomorrow. Okay. I'm sorry it's in English. Maybe it works in Serbian, but learn the words. Learn English. It's useful. The same applies to using microtime. So the same problem. If you want to measure a small snippet or know how long it happens, you start with microtime, run some PHP, then microtime again, and then make the difference. The thing is, if this relies on the system, this relies on the internal system clock. So again, if the sysadmin shows up and changes the time, suddenly you may have a length or duration for your script like -12, because it has been fixed and it relies on the internal system. On 7.3, there is HR time, which has exactly the same API except for the name of the function call. And this one is actually for high resolution time. So it means that it will actually be nanoseconds. So if you compare the number format I do with the previous one I can make the difference there. The second one, I actually have to divide it by 1,000,000 to actually get milliseconds. Probably don't rely too much on the nanoseconds because it's kind of random, but it's more precise, and it's completely immune to the actual change on the system. This also means that do not use the value of HR time by itself because it's just kind of a random number. You're just sure that it will start and always grow with the time passing, the time we and it share, not the system time, okay? Now, what's this one? Oh, we mentioned the return of the reference. I told you use the references, but always clean after them. If we have that, create an array, 2 or 3 elements, do a first loop on it with nothing, just do nothing. Do a second array right after, again doing nothing. So what happens if we do nothing all the time? A bug, of course. We're going to end up with this array. Yes, what happens? The first one says, okay, we're going to review all the elements and put a reference on the on the current one we're using. So it's fine. 0 goes to 0, 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and we stop there. But we keep the reference. It's not destroyed. The reference is still there. And then we try again. Okay, we're going to review again A by assigning all its elements to B. And B is still pointing to the last element in the first array. So again, we're going to say B is now 0, 1, 2, and when we reach the last one, well, B has already been transferred to 2, so it's again 2. It has been modified, okay? So anytime you've got 2 for each like that, do not reuse the variables, do not reuse the references in particular. You have to always put an unset. Now, of course, there are lots of situations. Okay, I just have 1 for each into my function. Yeah, okay, you can save the unset, okay? that's just going to bite someone who will add a second for each later. And that happens too often. Otherwise, it might be two for each that are really widely separated by a lot of code, and you don't pay attention to it because it's too far. It's like out of the screen. As a discipline, I always add the unset, just to make sure. And that's all, that prevents me from biting myself later. And we're going to finish that and then go to the questions. Let's finish on this one. That looks like PHP 4 code, right? Why? It's long and cumbersome. Who's still using this syntax? Is there anyone here who likes to use array, long arrays, and list? No? Even the PHP 4 guys, please? No? Okay, I do. Don't work for me. So we actually moved already. It's not exactly PHP 5, but it fits the narrative, so I will keep it this way. It's not exactly true, but we already shortened the arrays in PHP 5. We shortened the list in PHP 5.6. Then we actually make it a lot better like that. We're saving a lot of characters. Hard disk are so happy with us. And in PHP 7, we moved to that, which is even better, right? It's even better. We do not rely on the order of the right side of the equivalence, because PHP is now smart enough to say, oh, W, it's the second element, so I'll assign the D to the first variable, and the E will be on the second element, so that will go to the A, to the B, yeah. Oh, too much later. So that works. And actually, you can do a lot of trickery with that, meaning that you can nest them, and you can even go further by assigning it twice. Like you see the A on the list. You cannot read that anymore, right? Don't you forget, don't you regret now that you should use list instead of those brackets? No? No, okay, wow. But there he is actually used twice. We can do several assignments at the same time. Are you excited? You afraid? Okay, so let's finish with this inode. Where can you use that without looking like crazy guy? There's a place. There's a place. There's the for each. Remember, how do you read a for each? Here I give you again one of those examples, reading something from the database. We read the for each, assign it to row, and then the row is an array, so we actually have to use this array syntax all the time. But actually, we can actually stick a list there. And by sticking the list, suddenly the middle part is a lot smaller and a lot more readable. No, that's too much quizzical looks. Anyway, so we'll finish that. You wanted a top 10. Here is a top 10. The top 10 is all there. Dangling reference is probably the most damning stuff, so check that early enough. The 4 with count is more performance. Next month is funny. The one I didn't mention is unset. It was in a previous slide, but it's kind of short, so I didn't mention that. Unset, if you unset a property, you're going to destroy the whole property. Even if you defined it, PHP will say, okay, you don't want it anymore, I remove that, and you will end up with undefined properties, okay? So if you want to destroy properties, assign it to null. Well, assign null to it. That would be a lot safer, and you keep the structure with removing the elements. And that will save you from, not understanding why you write code and it disappears along the way. Release gone, the missing subpattern will have now its problem. And yeah, if you want to check them, well, Exacat, it's not the only one tool, but Exacat has all of those under control. So you can just review all your code and know exactly where you could apply some upgrades. Some of them are just suggestions, others are bugs. So take a look, and that's interesting. And we're going to finish with that. Thank you.